In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, I want to begin this video by saying that if I crash financially or go bankrupt, I didn't spin myself into oblivion. If I disappear, I didn't disappear. And if I commit suicide, I didn't commit suicide. I'm not suicidal in any way. And the only reason I'm putting this out there is stranger things have happened to those that speak about such things. And so I've said before that this channel isn't political. And I've tried as best I could over the years to try and articulate things in a way where to try to bridge the gap that seems to be there between the political realm and biblical prophecy, and it's something that we need to be able to see it as connected. So, as I said in the last video, the structure, the entire structure of the first beast in Revelation is in place in the world right now and is being implemented under the banner of a new world order. And there's a number of words they use to promote this. And they all sound good until you start digging into what it actually means and these words, what they support, and kind of do your homework on it and really listen to what people are saying. And I did post in the community section of this channel a number of quotes by different people that are very high profile and very rich and very powerful. So as I said, if I disappear, I didn't disappeared. Okay, I just want to let you know that. I do also want to talk a little bit about some of this prophecy and things that are out there in hindsight. And again, it's the reason that I caution my viewers from going to, scrolling through different things on YouTube or social media that is all doom and gloom. Okay. And it may seem that, our backs are up against the wall as Catholics and as Christians and as people of faith and a people that believes in God. I would say that if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in demons, you should. Okay. Even the demons believe in God, and they tremble. It is a very important thing for us to understand. Again, I think most of the people that watch this channel, I know a lot of them, understand the times in which we're living. And what we saw was like a first surge, I think, before this election with the last 8 years. I would say the last 12 years. We saw an initial push and then a real surge of the demonic. And it some of it or most of it comes through politics and through policy. Okay. And what we need to understand as a church is that a new world order is more, how would I say, capitalistic and policy driven than anything else. Okay. Now there is a portion of it which is a false religion or a false church and that kind of thing. But it is the majority of it is people in power. Okay. And I've tried to explain this before, just going, in teaching on the book of Revelation and things like that. Some of it's written down in the book Beyond the Second Veil that I released, I don't know, maybe a year ago. But it is political in nature. And so it's people that take control of the globe, basically. In this video, what I want to talk about are these slogans again, or these, how would I say, these words they use to promote this. And there was a viewer that had just left a comment, and I completely forgot about this, and what it was, Build Back Better. And that all sounds real good until you understand what they want to build. The fundamental transformation of America. I've talked about this before. Now, it sounds real good the way one of our former presidents said it in a speech, and that was, I think, one of the problems with a lot of people, where they were listening of how things were said, but not really listening to what was said. the fundamental transformation of America would have to include doing away with the Constitution, because the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is the foundation. And the foundation of America is, or a portion of it, was that it was built on Christian and our Judeo-Christian values. Okay. So Build Back Better, that was one. Another one I want to point out to you is, and this is a word that is tossed around a lot, and it sounds really, really good. First, what happens is it introduces things within the word within the suggestion, excuse me, without coming out and just saying it. Okay, so it subconsciously affects how you think. Okay, so sustainability, that's the word I want to talk about here first. So sustainability, if you listen to people that use these kinds of words and are in the direction or moving in the political direction of the progressive movement, which again I explained to you, again you can do your own research, is really an offshoot of the Communist Party USA and the Democratic Socialist Party USA, both of which ideologies go against the teaching of the Catholic Church. They sound real good. Sustainability, when they speak about this, it immediately, whether we realize it or not, what it does subconsciously is it creates a question within the mind of whether or not things are sustainable. And then they offer the solution. Okay, so sustainability at the highest level, what they're talking about is basically depopulation, because there's too many people on the planet, according to them, and we're using up all the natural resources. And we need to move to electric. We can't use oil. We can't use gas. And that's where all this will go. In California, there's been some very extreme laws. They want to do away with gas cars by the year 2030, which I found kind of ironic, because it falls into the category, or one of the categories of the Sustainability Act of the 2030 agenda, according to the UN. And you can go on that website and just read it. And so we see our governor moving in that direction and kind of nudging. The odd thing is that what's unsustainable is that if all you have is electric cars in the state of California, we don't have the infrastructure to charge those cars. And there's been times where we've had rolling blackouts in California, where the government has asked the citizens not to charge their cars in certain areas and at certain times, because it'll overload the system and crash. So the only option to that, where we're at now with technology and infrastructure, is the only way that it would be sustainable is if you did away with a whole bunch of the population of California, and then it wouldn't overload the system. And this is really the end game of it. It's one of the reasons, as I've said, we see people, certain people buying up farmland. Okay, they're making an investment, because the end game, the end goal of this is to control all the natural resources. And the way you control people is you control the food, the natural resources, and the healthcare. And so this depopulation thing we see taking shape. Okay, so the idea of it, there's too many people on the planet, starts at the very top, like I said, with like the WEF and Davos and the UN and all of that kind of thing about depopulation. And then it works its way down into local governments and is spit out in the form of assisted suicide. Okay, I think in Canada there's a deal called MAID, and it's medical assistance in dying or something. And I've seen a couple of commercials from Canada about this, and they make it sound like it's such a beautiful thing just to die, and give up your life. And the reason is because, as I said, they see human beings as just a commodity. Once you're no longer capable of work and production, then you become a burden to the planet. In an interview with John Kerry, I saw him talking about sustainability and kind of using language that leaned in the direction of the planet being overpopulated. But the thing that he said is, we have to do it. We have to do it for the planet. not for humankind, not for mankind, not for that people live better lives, but for the planet. And the irony of this is these people like this never see themselves as part of the problem. Even though they're flying around in their private jets, they eat at these, really beautiful and expensive restaurants and, prime rib and steak and champagne. It's like, what it reminds me of is Hunger Games. And so you saw how the one group of people, the elite, lived in this beautiful city with all everything you could ever want or need, and then some. And then you had these, I guess, communities that were just there to work and support them. And they were given just enough to get along, but never had a way of fighting back. And one of the reasons is because I think they were called precincts, is what they called the different groups or the different camps. Those people never had a way to communicate with one another, and they were pitted against each other through the Hunger Games itself. So you would have different precincts rooting for their person, never realizing that those precincts actually needed to unite to be able to break free from the shackles that they'd been put in. We heard another one recently in the election with this recent presidential race, and that was one that I think was, the person was trying to get it to be a slogan, but it really turned into kind of a joke, and I think more so probably because of the way she said it, or articulated it, rather than what was being said. Because if you had someone like Barack Obama saying it, and the way it was said, it would have sold a lot more. But it was so that we can be unburdened by what has been. Speaking of America, and so this whole thing again, it all points back to like class warfare, racism, white privilege. Reparations for African Americans by white people whose ancestors owned slaves. I never really understood this, because if you look at the history of it, the kings and queens of Africa actually sold their own people into slavery, not only to Americans but to others. And so the train of thought, if you follow it through, would mean that if you wanted to do the reparation thing, some of these people that want reparations would actually have to go to Africa and find the descendants of the kings and queens that sold their ancestors into slavery. And so again, it sounds good on its face to a certain groups of people, but these same people are unwilling to think beyond that. And it's one of the reasons that we need to be really aware and awake and think critically. Okay. Transgender care. That's another one. Okay. So it sounds real good. But the transgender care they're talking about is about mainly children. And there was recently a law which is shocking. I think it's what drove Elon Musk to leave California. But there was a law just recently passed in the state of California that if parents disagreed or didn't go along with their children's transgender care, that the state could actually take the children. That's tyrannical. That's not a child, that age does not understand these things. It's one of the reasons I believe they're trying to sexualize children in the schools. Sustainability, you will eat the bugs and that kind of thing. I don't know if people have really thought this through, but if you put people on a diet of bugs, okay, a large group of people, the only way that would be sustainable is if you had pockets of small population. Because if you took the population of the planet now and made them eat bugs, the end result of that would be clans and cannibalism, because they control all the natural resources. As I said, the oil, the gas, the the farmland, the meat, okay, cows, pigs, everything we eat for meat. The end result would be people doing whatever they could possibly do to survive. And so it's like, I don't even know that these people think about the ramification of the ideas that they're coming with, and this because they're completely out of touch of the real world and what happens on the ground. They live in the clouds, and I'm pretty sure there are probably some of them that actually think they're doing the right thing, but again, they're so out of touch with the average person that that they can't see the error of it and think logically to its ultimate and only conclusion. Okay, so the other one I spoke a little bit about this was diversity is our strength, or DIE. Okay, as I said, when you think about sustainability, it's subconsciously we have to do this for sustainability, and that's the way it's presented. So, whether people realize it or not, there is a subconscious subliminal message that's pushed into your brain to think, this is coming from someone in power and someone who has more understanding and knowledge of the infrastructure and everything like that, more information. And basically what it's doing is it makes us think that it's not sustainable. And what we're not asking ourselves is, do we have all the information, or is there a better way to make it sustainable? You see? And so rather than, and they do it in the name of protecting people, but the end game of this is depopulation. And Bill Gates has been very clear about this. We need to reduce the population by, 4 billion people or whatever. Diversity, inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. That on its face sounds good. Okay, it's the same thing with like Planned Parenthood. It sounds good, but there's no parenthood in Planned Parenthood. There's no parenthood. And so what is given to us as a positive, or a positive ring to it, is really nothing positive at all. Okay, it murders a child, an unborn child, and causes the woman great trauma. So there's nothing good about it. And it's an amazing thing to me. They've never actually looked at the other side. I think it's one of the ways of depopulating the planet is what I believe. I mean, we've lost more human beings due to abortion than anything ever in the history of the world, all the world wars combined. But diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, so diversity, that it starts off with a positive word. It sounds really good. Diversity. Who doesn't like diversity? I do. I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want everyone to be just like me or look just like me. What a boring world that would be. God believes in diversity. Okay, we're all different, but we're all unique, and we're all sacred. Okay, the life that we have been given is sacred. And so diversity sounds good. So there's the positive aspect of it. But then they throw in inclusion and equity. And what that, again, subconsciously, what that does to the mind in the way that it's presented is somehow, I would say, globally, okay? But if we were to look at it in America, what it's saying in a roundabout way somehow is that the United States is not diverse enough, the United States is not inclusive, and there's no equity in the United States. So we have to change. And then people go along with this because it sounds good, but then you see the end result of DEI, where you're hiring people and putting them in positions of great responsibility and power based on their sexual orientation, what they look like, the color of their skin, their background, their religious belief, rather than on their merit. And it's disastrous. And we just saw this with the LA fires. It is absolutely disastrous. Now, again, one of the things that I've noticed about this, because you hear a lot of the same things coming out of Mexico now, is that every time I have looked into I started to look into this, every one of the people that are pushing this stuff is either a communist or a Marxist. That's the ideology they hold. Or a globalist. So you see this ideology being pushed all over the world. As I said before about the immigration thing, it was all done in the name of mercy. Everyone deserves a chance. Everyone wants a better life. But when you take a whole swath of people and move them into a completely different culture, it may be diverse on the outside, but on the inside, when you cultures will clash. You know, I guess I would, if I were to use an extreme example, if we were to take every person that belongs to the LGBT movement, right, and we took all those people around the world and we just shoved them in Iran, how would that go? In the name of diversity and inclusion, how would that go? It doesn't work. It does not work. And so there's a tolerance that has to be there. We've seen this in Britain. In Britain, it's bad, really, really, really bad. Even the government there, from what I've seen, has turned against the people, and Britain's going to lose its identity. It's going to absolutely lose its identity. So there will be, if you think, well, I want to visit Africa, or I want to visit England. I want to visit Croatia, and to take in and to enjoy and explore the culture. That is what's being destroyed. There will be no culture when you begin just to move swaths of people. Now, I'm not a historian, but I believe that I have read somewhere that both Rome and Greece, and I'm speaking of the ancient empires, would move swaths of people into different regions in order to destabilize it. And so the people would never unite because of the clash of culture. They would never unite against the power and the tyranny that was ruling over them. They were never able to unite. But the DEI, if you think it, just listen to it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It all sounds good. But then when they force this in the way, like again in the community section, that was an absolute quote. I literally watched him say it. Larry Fink says people have to change. We have to force change. And so the whole idea from the upper echelon and from the clouds on which they look down on us is to insinuate that somehow people are not diverse enough. Somehow people are not equal. And see, they're all looking at it from a money side, from a work status side, they're not looking, they're looking at sexual orientation, skin color, and race and religious background, rather than looking at the American people, or rather than looking at people in general as a person. And so they don't recognize the dignity of human person. They don't recognize the sacredness of life, because to depopulate, this is what assisted suicide has to do with. You are no longer productive. And so you become a burden on the system, you see. The other one we saw was white privilege, okay, which I find amazing. And that's one that's really thrown around here in the United States a lot. And I remember seeing videos that they were so shocking to me, that people were so brainwashed with this. I saw Caucasian people on their knees apologizing to an African American for their white privilege, a person they'd never met in their life. And it's like I say, it's just an amazing thing to me, because when you look at slavery, there's more slaves now in the world than there ever has been. You know, they talk about slavery and, what about all the children that are being sold into the sex trade, or being sold into slavery? What about the men in Libya that used to have jobs before people like Hillary Clinton went in there and destroyed the place? Now they're being sold into slavery. See, so it only works in their favor when they want it to. Okay, there's not a broad brush of looking at this. And so the idea, again, when I stand back and look at this, when I just pull myself out of it, what you see is a fascist ideology at the very top, and these people live in the clouds that are completely detached from the average person on the ground, using Marxist and communist tactics to create class warfare and disrupt societies, communities, and culture. Okay, to destabilize them. And I've talked about this before. This is where you get the bottom up, top down, inside out. So this whole mass migration thing that was orchestrated as a global, experiment has now destabilized regions to where you have a government that used to be for the people and to protect the people are now turning against its own people. I recently read an article. I either read it or I heard it. Watched the interview with the guy. But in Britain, there was a woman had called the police because she heard a young girl screaming next door. And when the police showed up, they found a 13-year-old girl that was completely intoxicated and almost completely naked with 5 to 7 Pakistani men. And they arrested the girl for being drunk and disorderly. And we're seeing this. I mean, you see the clashes on the news that's happening in Britain. And the leader there, just recently, I posted it, I believe in the community section of this channel, where he basically admits that all this migration was a global experiment. Much of what was happening through the United States was being funded by people like George Soros, again, which owns the Open Society Institute. He believes in no borders. He believes in depopulation. He had messianic fantasies as a child. And so I'm not saying there's an empathy there that I have for this person, even though that I believe that his ideology and the view of the world and the way he uses his money is absolutely evil. As a young child, he would take the property. He was forced to take the property and to turn in his own people, the Jews, to the Nazis. And that had to be extremely traumatizing for a person. And for him. And so, it makes you wonder about some of these people and their backgrounds and how they grew up. Inevitably, the only way out of this is prayer. What it will save the world is the rosary. And that's why I've said before, just recently, now is not that you can enjoy the victory of Donald Trump, whether you like Donald Trump, whether you don't like Donald Trump, whether you voted for him or this or that or the other. To me, in my personal opinion, he was the only option in order to save this country, because we were going to lose it. Imagine another 4 years of completely wide open borders and the people that came across. I think probably the majority of them wanting a better life. Okay? But you can't just, there's a way to do that. You can't just have an open border. And that's what these globalists were pushing. And it all happened at the same time, and it all happened right after COVID. And so you listen, pay attention to these buzzwords that they use. If in the mainstream media you hear the same thing used over and over and over again, more than likely that is propaganda. That is, trying to brainwash people into believing something that probably isn't true. Safe and effective. That's the example I would use. Every channel you turn to, it is safe and effective. It's safe and effective. It's safe and effective. And now we know the truth. It was never, completely safe, obviously, and it was never effective, because even people that got, that and boosted, still caught it. So the entire thing was a lie, and which is going to kind of move me into the next thing here. When COVID broke out, and we see this is, I want to warn you about this too, because it's what's happened. And if all you got to do is just think back on things the way they happened, and then the prophecy that would be spewing all over the internet, right? of doom and gloom. When COVID first came out, first of all, COVID was never prophesied that it was going to come, and there was no real detail. They say plagues and this and that and the other, but you can pull that right out of the book of Revelation. Jesus spoke about that. That's nothing new. Okay, we've had plagues before. We've had plagues in the past. The thing that was being pushed and promoted was this, magic oil or something that was going to protect you from COVID. Well, even if you caught COVID, you had a really, really bad flu, okay? Because really the only ones that were in danger were the elderly and people with a pre-existing condition. We know that now. They're even admitting that now. They're not trying to push the narrative anymore because it really didn't work. But what the prophecies that were being pushed was, use this herb or use this oil or drink this tea or to protect you from catching COVID and dying. In hindsight, you can see all of that as false prophecy, because there was never a real risk if you were young and healthy, or even, middle-aged and healthy, of it killing you. And so you see the false prophecy. And so it's again, I've said this before, be careful of what you're listening to. And listen to what it is doing to you, not only negatively, like if it's causing anxiety and fear, but also if it is causing like entering in a way that is subconscious, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because it sounds real good, but then when you look at what they're talking about, what it's doing in a roundabout way is it's accusing the United States and other countries of basically not being diverse enough, not being equitable enough, and not being inclusive enough. And if you're, the only people that I know of that actually do that on a very, very high level, are very, very diverse, very, very equitable, no matter where you come from, and inclusive, no matter your background or your race, is Christians. Jesus welcomes everyone. And where one person may not have enough, there's always another Christian there to share. And so it's an attack, but it's an attack in a way that is subversive. And then we start thinking, well, maybe I am better off than some. Well, did you work for it? I did. I grew up very, very poor, and my mother was very, very poor growing up. And so we worked for everything we've had. People make choices in life, and the poor will always be with us. If you go to the 2030 agenda for development and sustainability, the UN website, and you read that, one of the goals is to completely solve poverty. That's not going to happen, because Jesus himself said the poor will always be with you. And this is one of the ways that faith is completed through works, is that those who have give to those who don't. It was never set up to have a government take over the world and all the natural resources and control that and decide who gets what and who lives and who dies. They're doing this. There's a number of laws that are trying to be passed, and I think maybe in Canada, maybe even have been. I don't know. I don't live in Canada, but I think that I read this. I may be wrong, so don't quote me on it. But if you want a liver transplant and you're 65 years old with cancer, you're not getting it, because you're a burden to the system. You're no longer a good little worker and strong enough to do your share, and so you become a burden to the planet. And all this is like Mother Earth worship. They want to do it for the planet, which again, all sounds good, but they want to do it for the planet at the expense of depopulating the planet and controlling everything. And that, it's like I say, when you back out of this a little bit, and you think about the way this election happened in the United States, and the United States being probably the prominent global power, and as I said, a beacon of hope for the world. The miracle of him not being assassinated. How many people have been praying the Chapel of Divine Mercy for this country? it paused everything. It stopped everything. I just watched an address President Trump did with Davos, and he basically threw it all in their face. We're not going there. And he did this before when he was president. I pointed this out when he visited the UN. The United States will not go along with the globalist agenda. And so it's all out there if you just really listen to what people are saying. The president of Argentina followed him up basically saying the same thing. And so this is a Christian Catholic revolution, if you will, and not revolution in the traditional sense of the word. It is a spiritual revolution. And the only hope is conversion. And the way conversion happened is again through the rosary, through offering our sacrifices, our pains, our tribulations, offering our wounds, our hurts, whatever it is to God on the behalf of poor sinners and their conversion so that they see the truth of the kingdom of God that is among us. That they see the truth, the light, that they come to God. And this is promised. This is what the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary is all about. But there are very, very evil forces in the world, very powerful forces in the world that control the majority of the world's wealth. And I'm not saying they're bad people. Some of them I think have nefarious design. Others I think actually believe they're doing the right thing. But they've been brainwashed into thinking this. Either that or they don't understand the full agenda of those who are nefarious. This is why they start wars. This is why they overthrow regimes. That was the whole point, in my opinion. And again, it's my opinion. It was the whole reason that the United States went over to Ukraine and welcomed them with open arms into NATO. Absolutely obliterating a treaty that we had with Russia that NATO would not take one step closer to the border of Russia. And so they agitated Putin. Putin responded, and that's why they wanted the war, because they figured Ukraine, with the European Union and NATO and the United States backing Ukraine, they would be able to overthrow Putin and put in a Marxist government. We saw it happen, I believe, in Venezuela, where there was an election that looks like it was stolen. And all of these people are being, anybody that goes against the regime is being persecuted. Their justice systems are being weaponized and used against them. They're being put in jail. Zelensky did the same thing, even locking up priests. And we saw the same thing happen here over a period of 4 years when President Trump wasn't in office. They absolutely tried to destroy him and weaponize. We're watching it happen right in front of us. It's not only happening in the United States, it's happening all over the world. And as I said, I believe there's been anywhere from 15 to 17 regime changes since the Arab Spring. That was back when Obama was president of the United States. And it was fomented and pushed and promoted and funded by these exact same people to destabilize regions. And so be very, very careful about what you're listening to. When you hear slogans like that are coming across the mainstream media over and over and over again, stop and think. And really try to dissect what's being said and what it actually means. And who are the people that are saying it and what is their ideology? Do they believe in the Constitution of the United States? Do they believe that every man is created equal and endowed with inalienable rights by God and have the right to pursue freedom and happiness? Do they believe that? Or is their ideology not only against the Constitution of the United States, but more importantly, does it go against the teaching of the Catholic Church? Because they use words that sound real good. Saul Alinsky did this in the 1960s when he hijacked the word out of the Catholic Catechism of the Catholic Church, social justice, and he twisted it and turned it into something it was never meant to be. Pray the rosary, fast, because the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary is the end of this game. No matter how bad it gets, we can't lose hope. That is our hope. It's already been promised and it will happen. But the more people that we convert, the more people that is given the grace of conversion to turn to Jesus Christ, to give their lives to Jesus Christ, to live in a godly manner and according to the commandments of God, the more peace will begin to reign in the world. May God bless you. May he keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you. And may he grant you his peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.